Hey there, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, filling in for Chris tonight on this Friday. Those were the shocking images of a horrific plane crash out in Brazil, and it landed on houses in a residential neighborhood. We're going to bring you more of that absolutely stunning and really horrifying footage. And here's the question, do you need to be concerned the next time you set foot on a small airplane for a flight? We're going to talk about that in a minute. But then, Kamala Harris firing back at Republicans who say she's weak on the border. And she does this with a Southwestern campaign swing and a new ad. And we're going to play it for you. But the question is, will any swing voters buy what she's selling? We'll debate it. Then, is Israel about to come under attack from all sides? Because there are these new worries in the Mideast. But what does it mean for the hostages that are still being held by Hamas? And speaking of the Mideast, first, it was Russia that targeted U.S. elections. And now, Iran? We're going to show you how they're trying to influence who you pick in November and what is being done about it. Also, who radicalized those teens that plotted to attack the Taylor Swift concert? It's pretty scary to think about. We're going to reveal the man responsible. And with everything we just talked about, we got the perfect guest to end what has been a very, very long week. Duck Mom, see her right there. Yeah, we're going to introduce you to the latest internet craze. She is a single mom of three who added 3 ducklings to the household. She has millions of followers. You're going to meet her. You're going to find out why she's so popular. But we start with the tragic news that I mentioned, that absolutely horrific plane crash. It killed all 61 passengers and crew of a commercial flight in Brazil. Now, the plane was getting ready to land, hovering just over the country's biggest city, Sao Paulo, after an hour-long flight, but it lost altitude. It spiraled thousands of feet in a matter of seconds, crashing into a series of houses in a hilly neighborhood. The Vopas Flight 2283 was an ATR 72-500 twin-engine turbo-propeller plane. It's a common commercial plane. It's all over the world, I should say. There are more than 10,000 of these aircraft being used. So what caused this? And should you feel safe getting on a small airplane? I want to bring in right now former pilot, aerospace engineer Arthur Rosenberg. Arthur, good to see you. What a tragic situation. Have you ever seen anything like this before, and what do you think caused this?
Yeah, I've been flying since I'm a teenager. I've been an aerospace engineer, an attorney, and in all my years, I have never seen a commercial airplane do what this plane did. So, first of all, to the flying public, yes, flying is safe. Accidents do happen. They are extremely rare. We haven't had a crash in the United States in 14 years, but when something like this happens, it raises the hair on the back of your neck. So the question now becomes, how did this happen? This ATR 72 was minutes away from landing. They were at 17,000 feet. They likely would have been on autopilot. The flight crew and the passengers would have been getting ready for a landing. The flight crew would have programmed in a descent rate, a speed, waypoints, and the plane would have been on autopilot. And all of a sudden, if you look at the flight radar data, which is public and available, the plane's forward motion literally stopped and went vertical. So how does a plane go from over 200 knots to basically zero ground speed in seconds? Well, there's only a few things that could cause that. You could have an engine failure. You could have a propeller control system failure. You could have some catastrophic flight control system failure. And this plane was flying into known icing conditions. It's hard to believe on a clear day that you can enter those conditions, but this airplane, the ATR, and ice do not get along well. Your viewers may recall the crash up in Buffalo a number of years ago. The plane is notorious for having dangerous flight characteristics and ice. So in this case, what do I conjecture that happened? I think that this plane probably encountered ice. I think there may have been some other failure mode, an engine failure, a propeller control system failure, which halted its forward movement and started this plane on this rapid descent. When the plane enters into what was a flat spin stall, you're basically flying an experimental airplane. It's not a condition for certification. And God knows what was going on in that cockpit at that point, but this plane is just not recoverable. Plane went from 17,000 feet down to the ground in just a little over a minute. That's a 17,000 foot per minute descent, which is just mind-boggling.
Yeah, I'm watching these videos. They're so terrible, and I'm wondering what it was like for the people on that plane to go through that. I know it might be difficult to explain it, but if you can, what do you think they went through?
Well, when we prosecute these cases, conscious pain and suffering, what passengers go through during fatal sequences like this is always dramatic and heartbreaking. But I'm here to tell you that everyone on that airplane was alive and well and experienced the worst possible roller coaster ride that any human being can experience, ending in a fatality. The plane is falling, it's rolling, it's spinning, it's disorienting. You're subject to G-forces, which are beyond normal. You physically feel it on your body. And the level of fright that these people went through it defies description. I
want to go back to something you said, because we're watching this, and you mentioned there could be a number of different reasons why this happened. Condition of the plane, climate, we're not entirely sure at this point. How do people have confidence? Because as you said, how prominent are these airplanes across the world, and why should people feel confident going on them? Because I wonder if there should just be a grounding of this type of aircraft until they figure out what happened, or is this just a really tragic one-off situation?
Yeah, well, that's a great question and a great thought. So first off, there's about 1,000 of these ATRs that are flying in the world. They're predominantly used outside the United States, the bulk of them. Some of them are flying in the United States. They've been subject to FAA review of its flight certification, and the findings have been somewhat equivocal. Everyone agrees that this plane, by design, and ice do not get along. It's a airplane with two gigantic jet engines with propellers on them that put out almost 3,000 horsepower per side. The wings are a little bit small for the size of the plane. It has a somewhat unique flight control system. It uses ailerons and spoilers for roll control. And when you put it all together and you put ice on a wing changes the shape of a wing. When you change the shape of a wing, you change its aerodynamics, and God knows what you end up with. It's a wing that was not the wing that the plane was certified with when it went through certification. So here this plane has ice. The FAA, part of the procedures for this airplane are, by the way, that if you're flying into known icing conditions, you pretty much want to turn around and extricate yourself from that situation as quickly as possible with this airplane. Very, very different from a pure jet airplane. Right. Boeing 737 MAX we've all heard so much about, flying in ice. The way that system works is completely different. This airplane has a unique sensitivity to ice. And to me, in this situation, it looks like that may have been a factor, together with maybe one or more other failure modes, an engine failure, propeller control system failure. And I just want to also add, just before we went on air, they've located the flight data recorder for this airplane. The flight data recorder is the telltale box. It records performance characteristics, engine characteristics, flight control positions, every parameter that you could possibly think of. And assuming that it wasn't damaged in the crash, and it looks like it's okay, they will be able to determine what caused this horrible crash.
That's what I was going to ask you, how we can be determinative about what actually happened here. And if that box has the answers, we will come to a conclusion, and then I'm sure more questions will come from that. Arthur Rosenberg, thanks so much for coming on, talking about a really unfortunate situation, but thanks for your perspective as always.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we're going to switch gears right now, because as we speak, Kamala Harris and her running mate Tim Walz are in the middle of a swing of rallies across southwestern states. You heard how I said swing? I thought that was a good touch. Well, tonight, they're in Arizona tonight, about to speak to a crowd of 15,000 people. And Arizona is a key swing state. It's on the border. Republicans have been using immigration to mock Harris's work as the border czar. This is a title that Democrats say she's been incorrectly tagged with. Now, fair or not, a new poll found that voters trust Donald Trump more than Kamala Harris to fix the border by nearly 20 points. Today, Harris began to fight back with a new ad framing her as tough on immigration. Let's take a look.
Kamala Harris has spent decades fighting violent crime. As a border state prosecutor, she took on drug cartels and jailed gang members for smuggling weapons and drugs across the border. As vice president, she backed the toughest border control bill in decades. And as president, she will hire thousands more border agents and crack down on fentanyl and human trafficking. Fixing the border is tough. So is Kamala Harris.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
It's a good ad. It's a good ad. The question is, will voters buy it? Well, let's debate it with conservative media host and host of the Eric Bolling podcast, Eric Bolling, and the chairman and the former national co-chair of Bernie Sanders' 2020 presidential campaign, Nina Turner. You know what? I don't think it was because he was nervous, but we lost Eric Bolling, so I'm going to try to get him back. Nina, you stand by. We'll get this debate going on, because you don't want to just see me and Nina debate, unless maybe we do. I'll tell you what, let me get Nina's perspective real quick on this as we get Eric back on. So, Nina, here's my concern with this, right? I can agree with you that maybe she wasn't really the border czar, right? She wasn't on the border trying to make sure illegal immigrants weren't coming in. She had more of a role to understand why foreign countries, what were the issues with foreign countries? Why were people leaving? The problem is for American voters, are they going to be that nuanced? They will associate her with Joe Biden, the administration. They'll think she's part of the border. It was her responsibility. In fact, let me tell you that there was an original announcement back in March of 2021 when President Biden announced that she would be part of a full team that would deal with the border problem. And back, the White House last week voted on a resolution, or the Congress, I should say, voted on a resolution condemning the Biden administration and the border czar, and 6 Democrats voted for it. So it's going to be very hard to disentangle herself from that title. Is this ad going to be effective to do it?
Well, it's a strong ad.
And we got Eric
Jesse,
Bolling, too. So I'm glad we got Eric. But yeah, sorry, back to you, Nina.
Yeah. No, it's a very strong ad. I'm glad that she is pushing back and showing what she was able to do when she was in full control. I mean, she's in the second chair right now as she is the eventual nominee or presumptive nominee of the Democratic Party. She's still in second chair. And as you laid out, Jesse, she was part of an entire team. So the Republicans can say and try to spin this however they want to, but let us not forget that President Biden put a package out. Mainly it contained almost everything that the Republicans asked for, and it was stopped because President Trump told them to hold on, don't push that through, because they didn't want to give Biden a win. So if anybody is responsible for what is happening, not solving this in real time in this particular moment, that lays at the feet of the Republicans.
All right, well, let's get Eric's response. So, Eric, I'm going to ask you about your thoughts on the ad, but I'll also point out this, as well. Look, this is an issue that has transcended administrations. Donald Trump did not fully solve the border issue. And in this ad, and remember, she's running for president now. She's not vice president. She's going to be running for president. She'll have more control over this, but it highlights her work as the, AG, that her office was, announcing arrests and seizures connected to drug cartels, that her time as Attorney General, they prosecuted cartels as part of this, that they were just, she worked on the bipartisan border bill. So there's parts of this ad that are strong for her, and they could put the emphasis back on Donald Trump. What's your response?
Well, thanks for having me, Jesse. Let me just start with, no, Trump did actually solve the border problem when he had the wall was being built, when they were tough on the border. 1 month, April of 2019, there were 17,000 border crossings. Now they're 250, 300,000. So I would argue with you, Jesse, that he didn't solve it. I think he did. Now, as far as what Nina says, yeah, there was a bipartisan border agreement that came out of the Senate. The problem with that was that it allowed 2 million illegals to cross the border before they did anything about it. And of course, the House, run by Republicans, said, no, that's not going to fly. And Donald Trump supported that. So Kamala Harris can say whatever she wants, that she wasn't the border czar, but Lester Holt on NBC, which is no right-leaning network whatsoever, confronted Kamala Harris and said, you've never been to the border. And she laughed and said,
that was a bad moment. That was a bad moment. And that's going to be something she'll have to answer to. But just going back to that, Eric, and I'll come back to you in a second. But Eric, Donald Trump built only 52 miles of the wall. And so if that's going to be coming right back at him, potentially in a debate.
With the policy. The policy was remain in Mexico was 1, build the wall was 2, fortify the border with border agents was 3. They got it down to 17,000 for the month of April, 23,000 for the month of May in 2019. Jesse, look at the numbers. That was effectively a closed border under Donald Trump.
So, Nina, I am curious about this because I wonder how much Kamala Harris wants to separate herself from Joe Biden and his administration, right? I think there wants to be, this is not a continuation, we're going to be doing something new, but there's reporting that he is going to join her on the campaign trail next week. I'm curious if Democrats want that. Is that a good thing for them?
I think it'll be fine, Jesse. He's not running anymore, so he's going to be remembered fondly and cheered on because now she is running. Yeah, she cannot, this precarious situation that she is in, she is currently an active vice president. So she has to try to thread the needle between being a vice president and not running away from the Biden-Harris administration because she can't do that. So, yes, it is good. I think it would be very good because Biden, now that he's not running for president, people won't make too big of a fuss. I want to go back to something really quickly, Jesse, about comprehensive immigration reform. As you noted, and I just want to put an exclamation point on that, many presidents have failed before this administration, and many Congresses have failed before this administration and even the last administration. What we really need is not a Band-Aid approach. We need real, true, humanistic, comprehensive immigration reform, period, across the board. The American people want that, and the people we elect to office on the federal level have an obligation to do that.
By the way, as we're speaking, this is Governor Walz speaking live right now in Glendale, Arizona, ramping up the crowd there. So, Eric, by the way, as I'm watching this, Donald Trump, Montana. Now, I know he had some plane issues. He's got a lot going on. I mean, the guy can't catch a break in the sense there's a former assassination attempt, now mechanical troubles. But anyway, putting that aside, why is he in Montana? I don't quite understand it. Won that by 16 points. It's not really a swing state. Why focus the energy there when Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are going to the swing states? Yes, he's having J.D. Vance go there, but why is he not focusing on that? Why is he going to Montana?
I think you're right. I think it's a mistake. And he kind of gave that away yesterday at that 1 hour plus press conference where someone was asked, did your strategy change now that you have Kamala Harris? And he said, well, I'm going to let her get through the convention, the DNC, and then our strategy to hit her, as he said, will emerge. I think it's a mistake. I think every moment matters. And he's going to Montana because he wants to be tester. That's a very vulnerable Senate seat. There's a former Navy SEAL that looks like he has a shot at unseating Tester, along with 17-year Democrat senator. So he's doing that because if Trump believes, he believes. Here's the other thing. I think his advisors are doing him wrong. They're telling him he's winning, and he's not right now. Kamala Harris has bumped up in popularity, in money, in polling. He's got to bring back 2016 Donald Trump, but he's running 2020 Donald Trump because he has advisors that tell him everything he wants to hear, and it's a mistake. He should take every single minute. And you're right, Jesse. He should be going from Wisconsin to Pennsylvania and then Michigan, and just hit those three and continue to hit those three.
So if I heard it correctly, Nina, he says that after the DNC, that's when he's campaigning. That's when he's coming full speed ahead. We got a debate coming up. Is that a concern for Kamala Harris?
I mean, politics is what it is. I'm sure she's ready. She's ran many a campaign, and all candidates always know what the other side may or may not hit them with. And I believe that the Harris-Walz campaign will be ready. As they answered the concern about her border credentials, they'll be ready.
Well, speaking of the border, I'll just end with this. It would be great if we can actually come to some sort of resolution and not have it be a political football that's being used. But Nina Turner, Eric Bolling, thank you both so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. Let's break. 4 minutes, 5 seconds coming up. Is Israel about to be attacked by Iran? And as ceasefire talks pick up next week, what does it mean for the hostages that are still being held by Hamas? We have a man who's been in the middle of tense negotiations just like this. That's next. Here's a question we've been asking all week. Is Israel about to come under attack from Iran? Ayatollah Ali Khamenei promised to, quote, harshly punish Israel for assassinating a Hamas leader in Tehran, and a deputy commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guard said those orders are, quote, clear and explicit, and they will be implemented in the best possible way. This all happens just as ceasefire talks are about to pick up again next week. The U.S. is firmly supporting Israel, just released $3.5 billion worth of weapons to the country. And yesterday, F-22 fighter jets landed in the Middle East. So are we on the brink of an all-out war in the Middle East? And by the way, if that happens, remember the hostages still being held by Hamas? What happens to them? Well, let's ask former U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Kurt Volker. Kurt, thanks so much for coming on. I mean, what can we expect from Iran right now?
Well, I think Iran is thinking about its options. It is committed to attacking Israel. It may not want to do it directly from Iran, as it did the last time. It didn't work very well the last time anyway, and is probably more interested in getting Hezbollah to do the heavy lifting of attacking Israel. Hezbollah, of course, is much closer to Israel, so the missiles that they launch will be much harder for Israel to defend against. What's interesting is I think the administration has done a few good things here by releasing this tranche of aid to Israel. They're sending a strong signal that we've got Israel's back. We're giving them the weapons. Also putting some aircraft in the region, the F-22s that you mentioned. These are going to aid Israel with air defense. The one thing that has not been added to the mix here is a direct threat on Iran itself, that if it or its proxies attack Israel, there will be direct consequences. And that is where I think Iran is now trying to think it through. How can they still attack Israel, claim it's the proxies, and deter or avoid any engagement directly against Iran? And I think that's what they're trying to orchestrate right now.
If this, I imagine, could potentially be a more severe attack than we saw a couple months ago, do you imagine other countries would come to Israel's aid, for example, neighboring Arab countries?
Well, we saw that with Jordan last time already. And I think in terms of air defense, yes, it's possible. You might see a bit more in terms of support for defense of Israel. But in terms of action against Iran, I think that's really Israel and the United States that would either do that or not. And how Iran perceives that will be probably the main factor in how Iran decides how it wants to play this.
What happens to the hostages in all this? Because I don't want them to be forgotten as we talk about this.
And this is the tragic thing. It has been a very long time now, and we keep trying to push for a ceasefire. But the reality is that a ceasefire would allow Hamas to continue to hold the hostages for as long as they want. That they will view that as having succeeded by taking the hostages and preventing more escalatory attacks against them. They feel that they will have succeeded, so they will keep those hostages. I think this is something that needs to be dealt with directly by the United States, at least for the American citizens. We need to be doing everything we can to get those hostages evacuated.
By the way, the newly elected president of Iran, does he have any sway in this whatsoever?
It really is not the president who's going to be making the calls here. It is the Revolutionary Guard Corps in Iran that calls the shots on all. But
by the way, just to interrupt, the reason I said this is because he seems to be opposed to an all-out conflict.
Yeah, but he's a figurehead there. The Ayatollahs have the real power, and the Revolutionary Guard Corps has all the real military and security power, and they're the ones that are going to be calling the shots.
By the way, the $3.5 billion that you mentioned, I was reading that doesn't directly go immediately to Israel, right? It goes more to the creation of systems that have to be built and then eventually will be delivered to Israel, right? I mean, what are we talking when we say $3.5 billion was delivered?
Yeah,
or released, I should say.
It's a combination. The number is the amount that the president is now authorizing being delivered to Israel. Some of it will be transferred directly from U.S. stocks. Some of it will be reimbursement for replacements for those things for the U.S. Some of it will be newly built. But what's important here is the symbolism that with where we are with Iran and Israel, Iran is seeing that there is a strong, steady commitment to Israel.
By the way, the attacks that Israel had launched, for example, killing a key Hezbollah commander, how significant are they in the grand scheme of things?
Well, I think it's significant because Israel was making a point that it can reach inside Iran if it needs to. It can take out the leadership, so it should provide a deterrent to others who rise into those leadership positions to maybe have more caution because they might be subject to the same kind of assassination or targeted attack. So it is a shot across the bow for the leadership. It's not in itself going to change the overall capabilities of Iran or Hezbollah, but it may factor into their calculus that Israel has the means and is willing to use them in order to go after the leadership.
So the U.S., Qatar, Egypt, they're inviting Israel and Hamas to restart these ceasefire talks. You think this is unlikely to happen?
I don't see anything coming out of this at all. They don't want to have a ceasefire, the Iranians and Hezbollah. They want to keep up a low level of attacks. They want to put the U.S. and Israel in the position, and particularly the U.S., of demanding a ceasefire because that then equates to us demanding de-escalation from Israel. And it's driving that wedge between the U.S. and Israel that Iran and the others want to do.
Should the U.S. be doing more? Can they be doing more?
I think we need to view Israel's struggle here as in many ways our struggle. There are U.S. citizens involved here. There won't be peace until Israel prevails in some way. We should be thinking through and working together jointly with Israel on these operations to bring them to a successful close.
And we mentioned the hostages before, but should there be pressure on Netanyahu in any way? Should the families be, of these hostages be reaching out to the Israeli government in any ways? Progress can be made there?
There is tremendous pressure on Netanyahu already. He feels it. He feels this is one of his gravest responsibilities is to get the hostages out. And he has vowed to destroy Hamas. He doesn't want to, he's caught because he doesn't want to sacrifice Israel's future security for the hostages. At the same time, he needs to do everything possible to get the hostages out without seeing them killed as a result of ongoing attacks. It's a really very difficult situation for him. He does feel it. And this is, again, where I feel the United States needs to play a leading role in pushing for the release of the hostages and taking part in operations to extract hostages.
Is there any chance Iran will take their time in this? Or do you think that if they want to respond, they're going to respond sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I think they are going to respond sooner rather than later. I think we're talking days or weeks, not months and months, because they want to show the connection between their action and the attacks that took place in Tehran.
No.
But I do think that they are weighing carefully whether they want to do it themselves or whether they want to authorize their proxies and what the likely response to that would be.
Kurt Volker, thank you so much for breaking down a very tense and scary situation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, next break. 4 minutes, 30 seconds up next. Is America's election being targeted by Iran? Because a new report says they're coming after U.S. elections to try to sway voters just like you with fake news, fake websites. We're going to tell you if they're backing one candidate over the other and who radicalized the teens who allegedly plotted a terror attack at Taylor Swift's concert. Tens of thousands of fans were there. We have new information, and we are going to reveal the man behind the speeches that turned these kids to terror. That's next. Vote coming under attack by another foreign power. It's like we still talk about 2016 and what Russia did. Microsoft just released a report saying Iran is targeting U.S. elections by trying to steal voter information, create fake news, fake websites, planning disinformation to enrage voters, to sway voters, to sow discord among the electorate on very wedge issues, including gay rights and so much more. So while this latest effort was stopped, or maybe is trying to be stopped, how can we be sure this doesn't happen in a couple of months. Do we have anything big coming up in November? I think we do. Well, I want to bring in former CIA agent, former FBI special agent Tracy Walder, and editor-in-chief of Micro Center, Dan Ackerman. Thank you so much for coming on. Dan, my gosh, I'm reading about this and the different ways we are seeing Iran get involved here. What are you seeing? Can you explain it to us?
Yeah, I think that we have a whole spate of different types of misinformation, fake news, fake accounts, fake social media influencers, a lot of impersonation. And it's not just to get people to maybe change their mind about a subject or sow discord. It's also to kick up enough dust that we don't know what to trust anymore, because this looks like a real newspaper or a news website and it's not. And this kind of looks like a real one. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. So we just give up and go, well, I can't trust anything I see online.
And by the way, even the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, they're involved. Well, they're hiding behind different nefarious names like Mint Sandstorm, Storm 2035, Peach Sandstorm, Cepheid Flood. Tracy, this is really alarming because what they're doing is they know us so well. They know the issues that we fight over, and they're putting fuel on the fire, right?
Right. Well, thank you for having me, Jesse. Look, the IRGC, I'm not surprised at all that they're involved in this. This is the Iranian equivalent of our CIA, basically. So IRGC is exactly who would most likely be doing this. They would be running their sort of cyber ring. And I do have to say, one of the things that other nations beat us at is at really psychological operations, which, yes, I understand that these are in a way cyber attacks, but the reality is it is messing with our hearts and our minds, right? That's ultimately what the goal of these are. And the Russians, as you mentioned before, are really the ones who, I guess, got the ball rolling on this. In fact, there was another warning about the Russians also creating particularly fake social media sites. That tends to be their niche back in June. And so, to Dan's point before, we really have to be vigilant. And the reality is I am concerned at some point people are just going to give up and either start believing the disinformation or stop consuming news altogether.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other avenue. I mean, look, Dan, here's the thing. They might be taking a play out of the Russian playbook, but they are targeting specific demographics of people, right? They're targeting specific people because they know what's going to stir them up. And I think that's also alarming as well.
And it's also different from 2016 and 2020 in that in 2024, the technology is so much more advanced. You can now use AI to generate streams of text, of photos, of video, of realistic avatars of real people that looks like it's them talking. You basically have a zero cost, never ending supply of all of this material. So it's so much easier to flood the digital airwaves with it.
By the way, Dan, how do they track it? How do they know this was happening?
You can eventually figure out, if something's not real, you could trace it back. That's how they found a lot of the Russian operators in 2016 and in 2020. But there's probably a lot out there that we don't know about. And of course, because most social media websites don't force you to give up a phone number or a real email address or engage in a lot of tracking, at all, because that's, they want everyone to use their service without worrying about being traced. It's actually easy to have a completely fake shielded personality on there, and it does take a long time and a lot of effort to track down the operators behind the operators.
Tracy, what can U.S. intelligence agencies do to combat this?
Well, to Dan's point, the reality is we simply don't have enough people to track all of this. We don't. It wouldn't be humanly possible. Yeah. But I do think some of this onus needs to be on these social media websites in terms of proving who you are, because it's going to become more and more and more difficult as the market becomes more saturated with this to stop it. So we really need stricter rules around some of these social media websites, hands down.
Well, if you thought that this wasn't alarming enough, I'm going to go to something else. Dan Ackerman, thank you so much. Tracy's going to stick around for this because I want you to hear that we talked about this actually last night as well. Today, we got our first look at the 19-year-old who admitted to being a mastermind of a terror plot against Taylor Swift and her fans. And we also learned that he was radicalized by watching an Islamist influencer on TikTok. So who is he? Tracy, you know this preacher's mosques, right? You've monitored mosques in that area of Berlin. What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so this area is immigrant-heavy sort of area. There's a lot of subsidized housing in there. This particular mosque actually was finally shuttered in 2020, but it was actually raided by Berlin police in 2018 because it was suspected of basically being a cover for funneling money into ISIS. So this was actually a very well-known mosque. And after 2020, Abu Bara really took his message to social media, and that's where his platform started to grow.
How did he do it? What was he saying?
You know, it's really interesting because I know that ISIS utilizes social media, but it's really been new to people that they do. I mean, we have to remember, Jesse, in 2016, there were 345,000 ISIS-affiliated Twitter accounts. I mean, that was the thing. And so really, if you listen to a lot of Abu Bara's speeches, he's actually very calm. He's not necessarily the fire and brimstone that I think people expect. However, he is very relatable. And when you listen to his conversations, it's almost like he's speaking directly to you and giving people a sense of hope.
And just to be clear, it's not like ISIS or he directed these attacks, but they're influencing people who ultimately carry out, young people. We're talking about teenagers here. So I'll pose the question that I posed to you just before. Is there something that law enforcement, U.S. intelligence services, can put some sort of pressure or a legal challenge on social media companies to police this better?
That's the hard part, right? Because people have freedom of speech, freedom to practice their religions, all of that. However, if they can find information that this imam was directing these attacks on perhaps a dark website, because that's what's happening on these mainstream social media channels, that is where radicalization is happening. People buy into these ideas. Then they take that offline to the dark web and to encrypted channels. And if they can start to track those down, they might have a better way of being able to shut down their mainstream social media sites.
By the way, is there a particular kind of individuals, young people that are looking for this? I was interviewing somebody earlier today who said these are people who might be kind of lost. These are people who are going through a mental health crisis. They might have certain family issues. They're looking for answers online, and yet they're finding the wrong answers.
Right. So obviously ISIS uses social media because of its affordability, strategic reach, and then their micro-targeting. But the individuals they are really looking at are individuals who want things as basic as revenge, as basic as redemption, but also individuals that are status seeking, identity seeking, which you were just mentioning before. It's the same reason people join gangs. They are marginalized and they're looking for a sense of belonging.
My gosh. Credit to law enforcement to be able to foil this plot. And Tracy Walder, thank you for breaking this down. Scary stuff out there. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. This next break, 3 minutes, 45 seconds. Up next, we got the perfect guest for the end of a very, very stressful week. It's been a lot. Now, millions of people are obsessed with our next guest, Duck Mom. See why they call her that? Why would a single mom of three choose to bring in 3 ducklings into her home, put them in diapers, press record? We're going to ask her when she and her ducks join us next.
Come on, babies, out after curfew. Did you go to the club? Oh, my. How did you even get in? You're only you're not even a year old. Mooney, is that makeup on your face? You had no permission to go to a club. Naughty babies.
Classic Mooney, right? Am I right? Millions of people, millions, are obsessed with watching those 3 ducks live, honestly, their best lives. Videos of Jelly, Mooney, Topsy, they've gotten more than 100 million views in just 3 months. Their owner, Ika McLeod, joins me right now. Are we with Mooney? Is Mooney the star of the show?
Yeah, she's right here. She was taking a little nap, so she's still excited.
Well, I'm gonna conduct this interview before any of them run away because I don't want them they might be a little bit nervous on camera. Although maybe not because they have blown up. But explain this to us. It was a year ago that you purchased the ducks and they've helped your life tremendously, right?
Absolutely, yes. A year ago, I said, I want ducks. I'm a grown-up. I'm going to go buy me some ducks. That's pretty much how that went down. I went to our local farm store. It's called Inspire Farms. It's an organic farm store in Mesa here in Arizona. And I mean, basically the rest is history. I was really struggling at the time with my mental health, really severe depression. And I always tell people, they have just been the brightest light in such a dark time. And I think not just for me, but for everybody.
Yeah. Do you think that's why the videos have become so popular? They're helping. I mean, look, I could watch these guys. I could watch them all day. I think it's really entertaining. But do you think it's also helping people the way these ducks have helped you?
Yes, Jesse, for sure. I've received definitely between comments and DMs, hundreds of comments and DMs from people saying, you know, they've been really struggling with their mental health, particularly depression, and the ducks, watching the ducks, they look forward to it. Those people with anxiety, I post every single night. I'm very consistent. And for people with anxiety, we like predictability. So they know they can look forward to watching the ducks put themselves to bed every single night.
Wow. I heard a rumor. You tell me if it's true. I heard Mooney is a little bit spoiled. I mean, am I right about that? Maybe she doesn't, put herself to bed. She needs a little help.
Yeah, she's a little bit spoiled. Mooney sleeps in her own bassinet. This is actually her bassinet here, and she's not thrilled that her siblings are in it. She has to sleep next to me. She needs her ice pack, her personal fan, ice water, and if any of those aren't suiting like her needs in the middle of the night, she sleeps right next to me. She pecks at me or breathes really heavy, like one of those heavy phone breathers, in my ear to wake me up.
What a way to wake up. And by the way, didn't you train them to wake up at 5:30 in the morning?
I did. They are trained to do quite a few things. They are trained to get up at 5:30 because that's the time that the kids get up. They are diaper trained. They're very, very smart.
Wow. Honestly, I'm impressed. How did you do that? Or did you have the help of your kids too? Like, was it, because you're a mom too. You're a mom as well, not just the ducks, but children as well.
Yes, I am a single adoptive mom of 3 kiddos. And so the kiddos, they help, I think, with the care and keeping. The training came down to me, but the kids have learned how to reinforce it, which has been great. It's something we've been able to do as a family. It's brought us closer together.
By the way, before I let you go, they're not your only animals.
No, they're not. I'm out of control.
Well, what do you have? Chickens? I heard chickens.
Yes, we have a dog, a cat, 2 chickens. Peaches is the one I think people know the most, and she's always getting up to some sort of trouble in my house and destroying it. And then we have the 3 ducks.
Amazing. Well, you just gained a new follower. I didn't know about this. Now I'm addicted. I'm hooked. Mooney. Bye, Mooney. Bye, Mooney. She's such a diva. Such a diva she is. Good seeing you, Eka McLeod. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Break. 4 minutes, 45 seconds. Up next, a very special message that you don't want to miss. We'll be back. It has been great, though, to step in for Chris Cuomo the past couple of nights. And today happens to be a very special night for Chris because it is his birthday.